Danny Thomas, for example, I think knowing that, founded a hospital in Memphis, named it St. Jude's Hospital, Children's Hospital. What kind of patients do they take? Really hopeless causes involving children. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. But others, and you know how it is. I think it makes sense. You know, say your favorite team. Probably most everybody here likes Kentucky basketball.
Negative.
There's got to be one. Most everyone likes Kentucky basketball.
Yeah,
In the state.
Yeah.
In the state.
You know, a lot of the people outside of Kentucky hate Kentucky basketball.
Well, I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean I'll work.
I don't know. You talk to some UK fans, I feel like that.
Well, that's probably true. In this room,
Yeah.
except Dawn,
Cameron.
Cameron likes Kentucky basketball.
Fair enough.
But just play it.
All right.
So, I'm older than you guys, so I'm trying to think of a more recent example. Let's say, what was it? Two
You're a baby, remember?
2 years ago, remember they went to the final game and lost to Connecticut? But getting there, there was about 3 games in a row in the tournament. They won it on the last second shot. It was usually Aaron Harrison. Okay, remember all that. Okay, well when you're older and you've got grandkids and you're sitting back telling them, yeah, I remember back, 2014, okay, the NCAA tournament, and you might embellish the story just a little bit. Oh, you should have seen, man, the guy was 10 feet tall and he shot right over him, And, I mean, it was nothing but, man, we tend to do that, don't we? Legends grow and are born, and the story becomes a little embellished. Well, sometimes that happens with saints. Sometimes there's a legend that begins to surround the person, and people sort of embellish the story, as it were. But it isn't necessarily who the person really was. So a good example of that comes to mind would be St. George. Well, there's a legend that he slayed a dragon. Well, that's kind of a no-brainer. No, that's not true, right? What he was in reality was an early church martyr. He was an early church martyr. They didn't slay a dragon. Where stuff like that comes from, how we people can do. Okay? So sometimes you'll hear that. You'll hear legend. Yes, sir.
Norma and I, we were talking about Ruth. Of course, she was in the Old Testament. That she was Canaanite. Not correct. The reason I say that is we look up St. Ruth. And they talk about being in the Old Testament. She was a judge over here.
I think she is a saint.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah.
When I asked if there were many from the, before Christ that they canonized and maybe.
Were they declared saints,
Yes.
or just kind of presumed they were? Yeah, I think so. That was early on, before there was much of a process, as it were. I think about the quickest a person's ever been declared a saint. I could be wrong. There could be somebody faster, but I think it was Francis of Assisi. He was declared a saint only 2 years after he died. He was, he's probably, arguably, perhaps, the most popular saint of all time, and he was just an enormous figure in his own time. That certainly wasn't the way he lived his life. He didn't want any of that. Holiness is attractive, isn't it? Holiness is attractive. People flocked to Mother Teresa. I heard a guy tell the story. I think she came to Louisville, somewhere not too far from there. Whatever it was, he was there, and he never, spoke to her or anything. But as she was kind of traveling to where she was trying to get to, walking, he was on the other side of the fence from her. And she did kind of stop and talk to some people, and she looked at him, and that was it. All she did was look at him. And I mean, he broke down in tears just telling the story. He said, the look in her eyes, I have never in my entire life, before or since, seen such absolute, utter love come out of a human being. All he did was look in her eyes. That's attractive. That's attractive. Padre Pio, canonized fairly recently. He only died in 1968. He was a Franciscan friar, Italian. When he would celebrate Mass, it would take 3 hours. He was so absolutely, totally absorbed in the presence of God. And when he was a priest, it took 3 hours, and people didn't care. They were flocking to get in. Over here it's like, come on, the hour is up. Get on with it, man. Didn't care. Holiness is attractive. Here's the last thing that Canaan need to say about saints. Sometimes I think that we create these super heroic figures and sort of put them up on a pedestal. Sometimes I think maybe at least one of the reasons why we may do that is so that we don't have to try to be like them. But the truth is, they're not up there. They're down here, where we are. And the truth is that any human being, all human beings are capable of being saints. And not only capable, but are actually called to be saints. It's what sometimes is called the universal call to holiness. Every single one of us is called to be holy by God. And He'll do it when we make up our mind we're going to that. When we set out on the road and we don't turn back, it can happen. And there are saints that aren't officially declared so, many of them. People who are holy, people who we might know. We can probably all come up with somebody that we have known who's not an officially declared saint that, oh yeah, they were a saint, because of how they went about living life. I can think of people. I bet you can too. I see them in parishes where I'm at. I see them. There's started telling me, you know, he was probably in his 70s, maybe, I guess. He was telling me about how he had 2 children who had died, adult children. And one of them was a son who had committed suicide. And he had done this because he was going through a divorce that he did not want. And I guess he just despaired in the midst of that pain, you know, I mean, obviously despairing, and took his own life. And he said, but you know, Father, I forgave my daughter-in-law. In my opinion, that is a saintly act. How many people would do differently? How many would blame the daughter-in-law and begin to hate the daughter-in-law and to resent the daughter-in-law? I knew I was sitting in the presence of holiness. I knew it. I heard it. I could sense it. Wow. That is God at work. The saintly guy. Just an ordinary guy. Just an ordinary old country guy.
Doing ordinary things.
Right?
Oh, extraordinary.
Ordinary things, extraordinary love. What do you heard? Tell you one more story.
One more. There we go, we go. Yeah, because I finished the entire time I'm here. Sat at the desk for 11 hours. That's before I came here.
It's another story. Girl, 12 years old, or family has to resort to, we probably call it something like tenant farming, shared housing with other families who were doing the same. So there was a 19-year-old boy in this other family, kind of liked this little girl, had his eye on her, and made advances towards her, which she refused. Well, one day, while all the parents were out working in the field, and she, this 12-year-old girl, being the oldest of all her siblings, was left to watch over her younger siblings. So here's the 19-year-old young man, and he makes his advance again. Again, she refuses. He becomes enraged. And in his rage, he stabs her 14 times. Of course, she doesn't die right away. They take her to the hospital. But you know what that girl did? While she was actually being stabbed, she asked the young man, "What are you doing? You're going to lose your soul." She cared about him. She's worried about him. And then in the hospital, as she's dying, she tells the priest there, "I forgive him. I forgive him." And then the girl's mother says, at the trial, he does go to trial, he gets convicted, he's sent to prison. But at the trial, the mother says, "I forgive you." So he spends, I forget exactly what it was, he did 20, 30 years in prison. I think it's the 8th year he's in prison. He has a dream one night. Guess who appears to him? Little girl. She's got a bouquet of flowers, lilies. Guess how many of them she has? 14. And she gives it to him in the dream. And when the young man woke up, he realized he was forgiven. He began to change his life. By the time he got out of prison, he was truly a new man. First thing he did when he got out was he went out and sought out the girl's mother. And he apologized. He'd already forgiven her. He apologized and they reconciled. And that little girl, we now know is Saint Rcia. Her killer and her mother went to the canonization together. How's that for some early virtue? 12-year-old girl. 12. That says a lot. It says young people are capable of incredible things. Okay. Time to go. Unless there's a question. Next week, I think it's Margie. Mary, yes, Mary. You're right. Who is the same?
Okay.
We got that covered. So, let us then pray the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver